The first time Laverne saw the school, she thought it looked like a mansion. White pillars, red brick, wide green lawn, and a flag that hung so still it felt like it was watching her. She was 8 years old, small for her age, smart too, though Mama told her to never brag on it. "Smart don't keep you safe, baby," she'd whisper while brushing Laverne's hair. "Quiet do. Still do." But nothing in her that morning felt still. It was 1963, Swainsboro, Georgia, and Laverne Daniels was about to become the first black student to walk into North Elm Primary. Her father held her hand as they approached the gates. He was tall, taller than anyone she knew, and people always said he looked like a... Laverne wore a pale yellow dress with lace trim, sewn by her Aunt Clara. Mama had pressed her hair extra straight that morning, pulling a little too tight. She didn't cry, not then. A few photographers stood across the street, men with hats and notepads. They didn't smile, just pointed their cameras and clicked. Laverne looked up. "Why they taking pictures, Daddy?" He squeezed her hand. "So the world can see you walk in." She didn't know what that meant yet, but it made her stomach turn. As they reached the doors, a white woman in a green skirt stepped outside. She had a tight smile and tighter curls. "Mr. Daniels," she said flatly. He nodded. "This here's my daughter, Laverne." The woman looked down, eyes cool. Well, Miss Laverne, we're glad you're here." She didn't sound glad. Inside, the hall smelled like bleach and paper. Kids' art hung on the walls, all stick figures and turkeys made from handprints. But something about it felt off. Too clean, too quiet. A few students peeked from classroom doors. White faces, wide eyes, some curious, some scared, some angry, none smiling. Miss Rosenthal, that was the woman in the green skirt, led them to room 2B. "This is Mrs. Cartwright's class," she said. "She's prepared a desk for Laverne in the back." The desk was small, wobbly. It sat by the window, away from the rest. The children in the room watched silently as Laverne took her seat. No one said hello. No one even blinked. Her father crouched beside her, whispered in her ear, "You are just as good as every child in here. You hear me?" She nodded. Louder now. "I hear you, Daddy." He kissed her cheek, stood, and left. The door clicked shut. Mrs. Cartwright started teaching like nothing had changed, but everything had. The first week passed in a blur. No one spoke to her, not even the teacher, except to correct her. When she raised her hand, she was ignored. When she didn't, she was called out. They passed out books with missing covers. Her pages were torn. They gave out snacks, but skipped her row. At recess, the children formed circles she wasn't allowed in. And when she tried to play by herself, hopscotch or jacks, someone always kicked her chalk away. But she didn't cry. At home, Mama would ask, "How was it today?" And Laverne would lie, "Okay." She didn't want to make Mama's hands shake, like they did when she got scared. She didn't want Daddy to look like he wanted to fight the world. At night, she'd hear them arguing in whispers behind the bedroom wall. "She's a child." "Lucille, she's our child, Ray, and they're trying to break her." The second Monday, Laverne opened her desk and found a note. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper. She glanced around. No one looked at her. She unfolded it slowly. 3 words, written in crooked pencil. "Go back home." She stared at it for a long time. then folded it again, slipped it into her pocket. She didn't tell Mama, didn't tell Daddy. She just buried it in her shoebox with her hair ribbons and pressed flowers. But that week, the notes kept coming. Some were single words. Nigger, dirt, not wanted. One had a drawing, a stick figure with curly hair hanging from a tree. That night, she wet the bed for the first time in 2 years. Friday as that week, the kids had show and tell. Mrs. Cartwright made everyone sit in a circle except Laverne. She had to stay at her desk. One by one, the students brought out dolls, model planes, comic books. Laverne had brought a wooden puzzle of Africa that her uncle carved. It fit perfectly in her hands. She'd spent the whole week deciding which piece to talk about. But when it was her turn, Mrs. Cartwright skipped her. "Thank you all. That's enough for today," she said. Laverne stood anyway. "I ain't showed mine," she said, voice shaking. The room fell still. Mrs. Cartwright stared at her, lips thin. "Sit down, Laverne. I want to show it." Silence. Then a boy named Philip, the tallest one in class, stood up and yelled, "Don't nobody want to see that jungle junk?" The room laughed. Mrs. Cartwright didn't stop it. Laverne's hands went cold. She sat, put the puzzle back in her bag, didn't look up the rest of the day. That weekend, her father called a man named Mr. Jacobs. Said he was with the NAACP. They met behind the barber shop after hours. "We need to document this," Mr. Jacobs said. "Names, dates, incidents, all of it." Daddy kept notes. Mama took pictures when she could, but nothing stopped the looks, the whispers, the silence. That Monday, her lunch went missing. Then her pencils. Then her whole backpack. They found it in the trash with the straps cut. She tried to tell Mrs. Cartwright. The woman blinked once, then said, "You really ought to keep better track of your belongings." One afternoon, as school let out, Laverne saw a chalk drawing on the sidewalk. It was her again. But this time, she was in a cage. She froze. A girl named Delilah walked by, smirking. "My brother says you people belong in zoos anyway." Laverne said nothing, just clenched her fists and walked past. But she never used that sidewalk again. On the last day of October, the principal announced a costume day. "Dress as your favorite storybook character." Laverne didn't have much to choose from. Mama found an old blue dress, added a white apron, and tied ribbons in her hair. "You're Alice from Wonderland," she said. "You like that?" Laverne nodded. She liked the idea of a place where things didn't make sense, where upside down was normal. When she walked into school, the kids stared harder than usual. Someone threw a crayon at her during lunch. Later, she heard someone mutter, "She thinks she a princess now." That afternoon, just before dismissal, someone slipped another note in her desk. This one was in red marker. "Better run. Tonight." The night after the red marker note, Laverne couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the window felt like a warning. She sat up in bed, clutching her stuffed bear, Freddie, worn and patched, but still brave. She whispered into his stitched ear, "You think they really coming?" Freddie didn't answer, but he also didn't flinch. So she took that as a maybe. The next morning, Daddy walked her to school again, this time gripping her hand tighter than usual. Mama had packed 2 lunches instead of 1. in case one disappears, she said flatly. When they reached the school gates, a group of white parents had gathered outside, murmuring. One man with a beer belly and a yellowed cap spit on the sidewalk when he saw them. "Ain't no place for here," he said to no one in particular. Daddy didn't stop walking. "Keep your eyes forward, baby," he said, "like you walk into church." But even church didn't feel this lonely. Inside, Laverne found her desk had been moved again. This time, it was all the way in the back corner, facing the coat closet. Her books were gone. "Where are my things?" she asked Mrs. Cartwright. The teacher looked over her glasses. "Perhaps you misplaced them." Laverne opened her mouth to reply, but then shut it again. There was no point. At recess, she sat alone beneath the oak tree, her puzzle of Africa in her lap. The pieces comforted her. Solid, familiar, whole, until a shadow fell across her knees. It was Philip again. He snatched the puzzle from her hands. "Still playing with Africa, like it's Disneyland?" he sneered. "Give it back," Laverne said, standing. He raised it high. "Or what? You gonna tell your NAACP daddy?" Laverne stepped forward, her fists trembling. "I said give it." Then, to her surprise, another voice cut in. "She said give it." It was a girl, white, freckled, ponytail. Laverne remembered seeing her in the hall, always quiet, always reading. Philip turned. "What you care, Sarah?" Sarah didn't blink. "It's hers. Give it back." He rolled his eyes and tossed the puzzle into the dirt. "Whatever." He stormed off, muttering. Laverne knelt, picking up the pieces. Sarah crouched beside her. "You okay?" Laverne nodded slowly. "Thanks. I like your puzzle." Laverne blinked. "You do?" Sarah smiled. "It looks like something from a library. I love libraries." They sat there for the rest of recess, not speaking much, but not alone either. After that, Sarah started sitting next to Laverne at lunch. Some kids called her names for it. "Nigger lover," they'd hiss. But Sarah didn't flinch. "Why are you helping me?" Laverne asked one day. Sarah shrugged. "My daddy says everyone deserves dignity, even if others forget it." The word sounded fancy. Dignity. Like something sewn into church hats or stitched on banners. She liked how it felt in her mouth. But cleanness had a price. 2 weeks later, Sarah came to school with a split lip. "They say she ain't allowed to talk to you no more," Sarah whispered. "Daddy says it's not safe." Laverne felt her heart drop. Sarah didn't come to school the next day, or the one after that. Her desk stayed empty for the rest of the semester. Alone again, Laverne buried herself in books. When the teacher allowed her to check them out, which wasn't often, she picked ones about space and stars and faraway places. She liked the idea of escape, of orbit, of distance. Sometimes she'd write little stories of her own, about a girl who could fly, who could disappear, who could turn invisible when danger came. One day, she forgot her notebook in class. When she returned for it, she found Philip and 2 other boys huddled around it, laughing. "Look here, she thinks she magic," one said. Philip flipped to a page. "She got a whole fantasy about leaving this place. Ain't that sweet?" Laverne snatched the notebook. "Give it back." He stood up, mock bowing. "Yes, Your Majesty. May your black spaceship take you far." She turned and walked away fast, heart racing. She didn't cry until she was home. That night, she burned the notebook in the backyard, watching her dreams curl into smoke. Winter came early that year. Cold mornings, frosted windows, icy stairs. But something inside Laverne was hardening too. She didn't smile much, didn't flinch, didn't speak unless spoken to. Her silence became armor. Then, one Thursday, just before Christmas break, the principal entered their classroom with a clipboard. "We've been selected for the city spelling bee," he announced. A hush fell over the room. Spelling bees meant attention, praise, trophies. "Raise your hand if interested," he said. Hands shot up. Laverne hesitated. And slowly, she raised hers. Mrs. Cartwright blinked. "Miss Daniels, you want to compete?" Laverne nodded once. A few students snickered, but the principal only said, "Very well." After school, she studied for hours. Mama quizzed her with flashcards. Daddy made her say each word 3 times out loud. "Enunciate, baby." Like the world's watching. The day of the bee, she wore her yellow dress again, the same one from her first day. It was tighter now, shorter, but still neat, still hers. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, reporters, flashbulbs. Her name was called. She stepped to the mic. Her palms were sweating. The word was tenacity. She repeated it slowly, carefully. Tenacity. Bell dinged. Applause. She moved to round 2, then 3, then 5. Philip was eliminated in round 6. Laverne reached the final. Her final word, resilience. She inhaled, exhaled. RESILIENCE. Ding. Silence. Then thunderous applause. Her father wept openly. Her teacher clapped stiffly. She stood on that stage, holding her tiny gold trophy. And for the first time since entering North Elm Primary, she felt tall. Not safe, not welcome, but tall. The weeks after the spelling bee seemed like a distant memory, even though the trophy sat on Laverne's dresser, shining under the afternoon sun. She had never felt so disconnected from her own victory. The gold-plated award just a faint echo of the girl who had stood tall on that stage. At school, the teasing had only grown worse. It stopped calling her the smart black girl and started calling her the dangerous black girl. It was a shift that seemed small but carried weight, like the difference between being a curiosity and being a threat. She wasn't sure when it happened, but at some point, she realized the world had stopped seeing her as a person. She found herself at the edge of the playground most days now, sitting under the oak tree that had once been her secret refuge. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was just a place where she could hide her tears without drawing attention. One morning, as she picked at the grass, a voice broke through the silence. "Why do you always sit alone?" It was Sarah, of course. Her face was freckled as usual, but there was something different in her expression now. Determined, almost defiant. It had been weeks since they'd spoken, and Laverne wasn't sure what to say. Sarah had become a ghost at school, her smile erased by the whispers and stares. Laverne couldn't bring herself to tell her she was better off keeping her distance. "I don't mind," Laverne muttered. "It's safer." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Safe? This is safe?" She glanced around at the kids who were playing dodgeball, laughing and joking. "This is just chaos." Laverne didn't say anything, unsure of how to explain what it felt like to walk through a world that wasn't built for people like her. A world that told her daily, in 1,000 little ways, that she didn't belong. "I miss you sitting with me," Sarah said softly, sitting down next to her. "We should be together. We can fix this, you know. We don't have to be quiet about it." Laverne looked at her, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Fix it? You can't fix hate. You can't fix people who decide you're worth less than them. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady. I know, but we can change things, Laverne, even if it's just one person at a time. Laverne looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. There was no fear in Sarah's eyes, just a stubborn belief that they could somehow make it through. And in that moment, Laverne felt a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark of something that had almost been extinguished. Okay, Laverne whispered. But how? Sarah's smile returned, shy but real. We start by showing them who we are. The days that followed were filled with small acts of defiance. Laverne didn't sit alone anymore, though she could feel the weight of every stare. She and Sarah ate lunch together every day, even when the other students threw taunts and insults their way. They walked the halls side by side, even when some of the teachers looked the other way, pretending they didn't notice. But there was one day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, and the school had announced that there would be a talent show. The kids were excited, chatting about what they would perform. Laverne wasn't interested in participating. She had enough of being in the spotlight. But Sarah wasn't taking no for an answer. Laverne, she said one day, tugging at her sleeve as they walked down the hall. We're doing this together. We'll show them what we're made of. Laverne hesitated. Okay, Laverne agreed, her voice barely a whisper. What do you want us to do? Sarah grinned. We'll tell our story. We'll make them listen. The days leading up to the talent show were a whirlwind of rehearsals. Laverne and Sarah worked on a skit, a poem mixed with performance art that told their story. It wasn't just about their friendship. It was about the struggle they faced every day, about how they fought to keep their dignity intact, despite the world trying to tear it apart. The night of the show, Laverne felt like she might throw up. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, and students filled the seats, and the air was thick with tension. Laverne and Sarah were backstage, waiting for their turn. Laverne could feel the knot in her stomach tightening with every passing second. You ready? Sarah asked, squeezing her hand. Laverne nodded, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. As they walked onto the stage, the lights felt blinding, and the murmurs of the crowd made her head spin. But as soon as Sarah began to speak, everything else faded away. We're not your stereotypes, Sarah's voice rang out, clear and strong. We are more than what you see. We are not afraid. We are not invisible. Laverne joined in, her voice growing steadier with each line. We will not be broken. We will not be silenced. We will not let you define us. The audience was quiet at first, unsure of how to respond. But as Laverne spoke, she felt something shift. Something inside her, like the tiny spark of hope from weeks ago, finally catching fire. By the end of the performance, the entire auditorium was silent. Then, slowly, the applause started. First, it was hesitant. Then it grew louder, more confident. And as Laverne stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, she realized that the world had seen her, not as a black girl, not as an outsider, but as a person who had a story to tell. This was just the beginning. The days after the talent show felt surreal. For the first time in months, Laverne felt like she could breathe, like the weight of the world wasn't pressing down on her every moment. The applause, the looks of surprise from the other students. It was as if the world had finally acknowledged her existence. But with that recognition came something else: expectations. The next morning, as Laverne walked into school, she noticed something different. The hallway felt quieter. Students, who had once made it a point to avoid her, now watched her closely. The whispers were still there, but they had changed too. Instead of the usual mocking tones, there was a sense of curiosity, as though they were trying to understand her. Did you see that girl in the talent show? But Sarah found her there, as usual, and sat beside her without a word. They didn't need to speak. The silence between them was a comfort. Sarah had always understood the weight of things without needing an explanation. After a while, Sarah spoke. "So what do we do now?" Laverne looked at her, still unsure of the answer. "I don't know. I thought it would be easier, but it's not. It's like now they expect me to keep fighting, to keep proving myself." Sarah nodded. "I get it. You're not just a kid anymore. You're someone they think they can read, but you're more than that." "I don't want to be a symbol," Laverne said softly. "I just want to be me." For the first time in a while, Sarah smiled. It was a small, knowing smile. "I think you've always been you, Laverne. You just had to find your voice." Laverne leaned back against the tree, staring up at the sky. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about the next battle. She was thinking about the possibility of just being. Being herself in a world that didn't want her to be. And next week, something unexpected happened. Laverne was called to the principal's office. Her stomach dropped as she walked down the familiar hallways, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Had she done something wrong? Was she being punished for her defiance in the talent show? When she stepped into the principal's office, she was surprised to see not only Mr. Harris, but also a few teachers she didn't recognize. There was a strange, formal air to the room, and she immediately felt out of place. "Laverne," Mr. Harris began, his voice serious but kind. "We've been watching you, and we think it's time we offer you an opportunity." Laverne blinked, confused. "An opportunity?" One of the teachers, a woman with short dark hair, spoke up. "We want to invite you to join a special program we're creating. A program focused on leadership and diversity. We believe you have the potential to inspire others." Laverne couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Wait, you want me to be a leader?" Another teacher nodded. "Yes, exactly. You've already shown courage, and we think you can be a role model for other students, especially those who feel voiceless." Laverne didn't know what to say. Her first instinct was to reject it, to tell them she wasn't a leader, that she was just trying to survive. But then she remembered the feeling she had on stage, the way the audience had listened, the way her words had mattered. She had a voice, and maybe this was her chance to use it. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice quiet but resolute. As she walked out of the office, the weight of what had just happened settled on her. She had always been afraid of being seen, afraid of the expectations that came with being different. But now, for the first time, she wondered if maybe she could be someone who made a difference. Maybe she could be the one who spoke up when no one else would. That afternoon, after school, Sarah met her under the oak tree again. Laverne didn't need to say anything. Sarah just looked at her, waiting for her to speak. "I've been asked to join a leadership program," Laverne said finally, her voice a little shaky. "They think I can make a difference." Sarah's face lit up. "Laverne, that's amazing!" "I don't know if I can do it," Laverne admitted. "It's one thing to stand up for myself, but this is different. It's like, now people are looking at me, expecting me to have all the answers." "Laverne," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm, "you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be yourself, and you've always been enough." Laverne looked at her, her heart swelling with gratitude. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the only thing she had to prove was that she was worthy of her own story. That she didn't have to be perfect. That she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders alone. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be afraid of being seen anymore. The decision to accept the leadership program was a weighty one, but as Laverne sat in her bedroom that night, the stars just beginning to peek through her window, she felt something new stirring inside her, a sense of possibility, of power. She had never imagined that something as small as a single decision could change the trajectory of her life. But in that moment, it felt like it could. It felt like a door opening. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, workshops, and late nights spent thinking about what it meant to be a leader. At first, the program felt alien to her, like she didn't belong. The other kids in the group were so confident, so sure of themselves. Some of them had their own histories of activism and involvement. But for Laverne, every session felt like a new challenge, a reminder that she had always been told to stay in the background, to never take up too much space. One afternoon, as the group gathered in the school library for a workshop on leadership, Laverne sat in the back, trying to blend in. But her mind was elsewhere, lost in the noise of her own insecurities. Laverne, Miss Williams, the program facilitator, called out from the front of the room, "Would you like to share what you're thinking?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward her. Laverne's heart raced. She hadn't expected to be called on, hadn't prepared for it. But in that moment, something inside her snapped. I don't think I belong here," she said, her voice trembling at first. "I've always been told to stay out of the way, to not make waves. I've been told that people like me, girls like me, don't get to lead. But I guess I'm starting to wonder why that is." There was a long pause in the room, and for a moment, Laverne felt like she was sinking, like everyone was judging her. But then Miss Williams smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "You belong here, Laverne," she said, her voice calm and sure. "All of you do. Every single one of you. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, being real, and lifting others up. You've already done that, just by being yourself." Laverne felt something shift in her chest. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe she didn't have to carry the burden of everyone's expectations. Maybe all she had to do was show up, speak her truth, and let the rest fall into place. After that moment, something changed within her. The next time the group was tasked with presenting a leadership project, Laverne didn't hesitate. She shared her idea about creating a safe space for kids of color at the school, an idea that had been brewing in her mind for weeks, but that she had been too afraid to voice. She talked about the importance of visibility, of seeing Black voices represented and heard, and of creating a community where no one was invisible. The other kids were quiet at first, unsure of what to say. But then, one by one, they began to speak up, to add their thoughts and ideas. And as the conversation continued, Laverne felt something incredible. Solidarity. It wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing together, lifting each other up, and working towards something bigger than themselves. By the end of the workshop, the group had come together to create a proposal for a school-wide event, a celebration of Black culture and history, led by the students themselves. It was an idea born from their collective voices, but it all started with Laverne's courage to speak her truth. When the day of the event finally arrived, the school hallways were filled with excitement. Banners, posters, and artwork lined the walls, showcasing the rich history and contributions of Black Americans. There was music, food, poetry, and storytelling. The event was a celebration of the very thing that Laverne had once been told to suppress, the essence of who she was. As Laverne stood at the back of the auditorium, watching the event unfold, she realized something. She had not just created a space for others. She had created a space for herself. A space where she could be proud. A space where her voice mattered. And as the event came to a close, the applause that filled the room felt different this time. It wasn't the kind of applause that came from pity or surprise. It was the kind that came from respect and recognition. It was the kind of applause that said, "You belong here." Laverne knew, deep down, that the fight wasn't over. There would always be more work to do, more walls to break down. But for the first time, she felt ready to take on whatever came next, because she knew now. She was not just a survivor of this system. She was a force within it, changing it, piece by piece.